It means a lot. Star Network is here.
Hold no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? Today is Wednesday, June 8th, 2022. Coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. One of the survivors of the terror attack in Uvalde testifies before Congress. Wait until you hear how this 11-year-old described smearing herself with her classmates' blood and playing dead in order to survive. Republicans show their ass in this hearing, but it's no shock. That's what they always do. The Department of Justice appoints a 9-member task force to examine the missteps of the Uvalde shooting and what law enforcement, their failure to respond to that mass shooting. Also, we'll take a look at last night's primary results. Iowa's in the history books after last night's election. Also, Congresswoman Karen Bass in a runoff to be the next mayor of Los Angeles. 6 Haitian Special Olympic athletes have gone missing in Florida. We'll tell you about that. Also, you're not going to believe what Washington Commanders defensive coordinator Jack Del Rio said about the January 6th domestic terror attack. Oh, wait until we play it for you. Yeah, he is absolutely a MAGA idiot. In our Tech Talk segment, a mother loses $1 million, so she develops an app to keep her kids from financial failure. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, roll, roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funky, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
He's everything that is good in this world. And as I sit here before you today, I can hear my son telling me to stop being extra and get to the point. I was going to tell you all a bunch of fluffy, funny stories about Zaire, but I have a message. So I'll get to the point. As Director of Diversity and Inclusion with New York State Senator Tim Kennedy's office, stories of gun violence and racism are all too familiar, but now these stories are Zaire stories. These problems literally knocked on my front door. These are issues that as a country we do not like to openly discuss. Domestic terrorism exists in this country for 3 reasons. America is inherently violent. This is who we are as a nation. The very existence of this country was founded on violence, hate, and racism, with the near annihilation of my Native brothers and sisters. My ancestors brought to America through the slave trade were the first currency of America. Let me say that again for the people in the back. My ancestors, the first currency of America, were stripped of their heritage and culture, separated from their families, bargained for on auction blocks, sold, beaten, raped, and lynched. Yet I continuously hear after every mass shooting that this is not who we are as Americans and as a nation. Hear me clearly. This is exactly who we are.
Folks, that was Zanetta Everhart, the mother of Zaire Goodman, one of the victims of the mass shooting at the Buffalo's Tops Friendly Market. He survived, but 10 others died. Today, family members who lost loved ones in Uvalde and Buffalo testified during a House Oversight Committee hearing on gun violence. Emotional, tense, compelling. One of the most compelling was 11-year-old Mia Cirillo from Uvalde. She described how she saw her classmates get gunned down by a gunman with an AR-15, and the only reason she was there testifying was because of her quick thinking. Listen to what she had to say.
We were just watching movies, and then she got an email, and then she went to go lock the door, and he was in the hallway, and they made eye contact, and then she went back in the room and she told us, go hide, and then we went to go hide behind my teacher's desk and behind the backpacks, and then he shot the little window, and then he went to the other classroom, and then he went, there's a door between our classrooms, and he went to there and shot my teacher and told my teacher goodnight and shot her in the head. And then he shot some of my classmates and the whiteboard. When I went to the backpacks, he shot my friend that was next to me, and I thought he was gonna come back to the room, so I grabbed the blood and I put it all over me. And
what did you do then when you put the blood on yourself?
Just stay quiet, and then I got my teacher's phone and called 911.
And what did you tell 911?
I told her that we need help and to send the police in our classroom.
If there was something that you want people to know about that day and about you, right? Or things that you want different, what would it be?
To have security.
Do you feel safe at school? Why not?
Because I don't want it to happen again.
And you think it's going to happen again?
The parents of Lexi Rubio, Felix and Kimberly Rubio, told lawmakers about the last moments they had with their daughter before the tragic event.
I left my daughter at that school, and that decision will haunt me for the rest of my life. Afterward, Felix dropped me off at my office, the Uvalde Leader News, and returned home because it was a rare day off for him between normal shifts and security gigs he takes to help make ends meet. I got situated at my desk and began writing about a new business in town when the news office started hearing commotion on the police scanner, a shooting on Diaz Street near Robb Elementary. It wasn't long before we received word from my son's teacher that they were safe, secure in the classroom. Once evacuated from campus, the children were reunited with parents and guardians at the Civic Center. My dad picked up Julian from the Civic Center and took him to my grandmother's house. One of our Robb kids was safe. We focused on finding Lexi. Bus after bus arrived, but she wasn't on board. We heard there were children at the local hospital, so we drove over to provide her description. She wasn't there. My dad drove an hour and a half to San Antonio to check with the university hospital. At this point, some part of me must have realized that she was gone. In the midst of chaos, I had the urge to return to Robb. We didn't have our car at this point, and traffic was everywhere. So I ran barefoot with my flimsy sandals in my hand. I ran a mile to the school, my husband with me. We sat outside for a while before it became clear we wouldn't receive an answer from law enforcement on scene. San Antonio firefighter eventually gave us a ride back to the Civic Center, where the district was asking all families who had not been reunited with their children to gather. Soon after, we received the news that our daughter was among the 19 students and 2 teachers that died as a result of gun violence. We don't want you to think of Lexi as just a number. She was intelligent, compassionate, and athletic, She was quiet, shy unless she had a point to make. But she knew she was right. She so often was. She stood her ground. She was firm, direct, voice unwavering. So today, we stand for Lexi, and as her voice, we demand action.
Other folks testifying include the mayor of New York, Eric Adams.
Children, time to decide if we are going.
My name is Greg Jackson. I'm the executive director for the community.
To be a nation of laws or confederation of chaos, and we must do it now. It is high noon in America, our country, the country I love. The clock is ticking every day, every minute towards another hour of death. I'm here today to ask every one of you and everyone in this Congress to stand with all of us to end gun violence and protect the lives of Americans. We are facing a crisis that is killing more Americans than war, a crisis that is now the #1 cause of death for our young people.
Folks, again, just more and more testimony, emotional, painful, and then there also was stupid. And you can always depend upon Clay Higgins of Louisiana to show himself being an ass. Watch this.
Did not have, that were built 100 years ago in cities in America. You know what they did not have, Commissioner? Locks. Locks. Now I ask you all, what happened to that country, man? A country where homes were built in cities with no locks. A country where guns were everywhere and virtually not regulated at all. Where millions of Americans, 14 million Americans came back. It's 11% of the population at the time after World War II with incredible skills of war and weapons of war, as you called them, everywhere. But we didn't have mass shootings. You know what these houses did not have? That were built 100 years ago in cities in America. You know what they did not have, Commissioner? Locks. Locks.
What the hell is he talking about? My panel, Rob Portillo, Executive Director, Rainbow Push Coalition, Peach Tree Street Project, Monique Presley, legal analyst, host of Make It Make Sense with Monique Presley. On Instagram, Law Victoria Burke, writer, NMPA in the Griot. We build homes without locks. Okay, dude, whatever. I don't know. Robert, this is how just utterly nonsensical Republicans are. Not only that, Republican leadership, they've already sent word to their members, vote no on all 8 gun bills that are currently being discussed in the U.S. House. The Republican Party has no intention to do anything about guns in America.
We have to understand that the Republican Party is completely bought, sold, and paid for by the gun industry. And the gun industry has to make sure that you have unfettered access to firearms. And right now, there are literally 50 million more guns in America than there are people in this country. So the only way that Glock, that Remington, that Colt, that Smith & Wesson can continue to make money is by continuing to make sure that you have absolutely no laws that curtail this in any way. There's some very reasonable common sense things on the table. You know, if you have to wait till you're 21 to buy beer, you still have to wait till you're 21 to buy a gun. Many states already have to be 21 to buy a handgun, but long rifles often fell into the hunting exception. But because semi-automatic rifles weren't contemplated when those laws were written, they were thinking about bolt-action hunting rifles. Well, then that's a loophole that people are exploiting. Close that loophole. The gun show loophole, where you can buy a gun at a gun show without going through a federal background check because it's a person-to-person sale. You can close that loophole and require that there be a electronic background check check that costs like $30 that you can do on your iPhone right now. You can do that right now. Mental health evaluations, as well as criminal evaluations of individuals, and even bring back the waiting period that the Brady bill instilled, where you buy the gun, you wait 5 days, and then you can either come back and pick it up or they ship it to you to prevent people from having crimes of passion. We also have to remember the leading gun deaths are primarily suicides in this country. So giving people a waiting period between the time they can buy the gun, maybe they will convince themselves or come out of their depression and end up not hurting or harming themselves or somebody else. So there's common sense things on the table that are not gun grabbing. They're not curtailing your Second Amendment right. They're not confiscating your weapons, but they don't want to talk about that because the corporate lobby, because remember, the NRA does not work on behalf of gun owners. They work on behalf of the gun industry. You can ask Philando Castile about that. You can ask Mia Rice about that. They don't give a damn about gun owners or people who are persecuted by the government for having firearms. All they care about is ensuring profits for the gun industry, and the Republican Party is in lockstep with them. You can see the same argument on fossil fuels right now when it comes to EVs. They're so embedded with the fossil fuel industry, it doesn't matter what logic and reality tells them. It's all about what the money tells them they have to do.
And look, Clay Higgins is an idiot, y'all. But a bigger idiot, Louis Gohmert, out of Texas. You want to hear crazy?
In debate last week and even today, to be told that we have no courage, that Democrats, we were told in debate last week, don't want to hear any more about social media, violent video games, Hollywood, mental illness, and they sure don't want to hear any more about prayers. They're disgusted hearing about prayers, don't want to hear any more about fatherlessness, drug use. Look, maybe if we heard more prayers from leaders of this country instead of taking God's name in vain, we wouldn't have the mass killings like we didn't have before prayer was eliminated from school. And it's not like we're not in debate last week and even today
Monique,
to be told that
Louis would explain what happened in Sutherland Springs, Texas, at a church where 26 people were killed, including an unborn child. 22 were wounded. There was prayer in the church.
Right, but he was talking about more prayer from our leaders. I mean, he's...
No. His end, he said, maybe if we didn't take prayer out of school, like we wouldn't have had these mass shootings like we didn't before. Wasn't there a mass shooting on the campus of the University of Texas before prayer was taken out of the classroom? I'm just saying.
Right, no, I mean, him being an idiot is like that was the precursor before he opens his mouth. So these people are not serious. What I'm saying, though, is he talked about prayers coming from leaders, and I do think that they should. I understand from Higgins what he was talking about with the lockless doors, and nobody can argue, I would think, the increase of lawlessness and rampant violence that has come along with the increase in joblessness, that has come along with the increased disparities in education and employment and wages and healthcare, and that makes for streets that are no longer safe, that makes for homes that require locks. So all of those things are true. I don't hearken to good old days because people always ignore the racism that's baked into the good old days, the same as it is now. But I believe, Roland, that the adequate response really is the take that Matthew McConaughey took on these issues. And it's one, frankly, that we used when I first started learning how to debate. It's yes and now what? Because being baited into arguments about whether we want more fathers in the home, sure we do. Whether prayer helps if you're a Christian, absolutely. Whether we like to be in times where we don't need locks on doors and we can feel safe and nobody's going to come across our threshold, right, yes, sure. There's no reason to argue about these things. Yes. And now what we need to do is talk about the fact that there are more guns in this country than there are people. Can we have a conversation if first we go ahead and tell you, yes, you are right. We agree with you. We want increased morality in this country. We want safer streets in this country. We want solid families in this country. Okay, now what? Does that mean that we can move the age range from 18 to 21 for buying these weapons of war? Of course not, because Robert is correct. Robert is correct when he says this is about the gun lobby supporting the distribution and sale of weapons. This is not about protecting the homeowner, because if they change that age range from 18 to 21, they will not lose a single voter to the Democrats. There's not one 18-year-old who has to wait until they're 21 who's not going to either find it on the black market or wait. There's not one parent who already has weapons, who has teenagers coming up, who has to wait until they're 21 and go through some program. They're not going to turn into liberals. They're not going to turn into Democrats and decide all of a sudden that they're into decreasing the number of weapons on the street. It's ridiculous. They know that their base isn't threatened by this. These changes are not going to lose anybody a damn job. The cowardice is because the NRA money will disappear, because the NRA is concerned with how many 18-year-olds aren't going to be able to take $5,000 and go buy these weapons. That's what the real issue is.
Here's what we're dealing with here, Lauren. Republicans want to throw everything out. Let's just throw anything. Look, and it is by design to muddy the waters. It is to just confuse people, because here's the one they always use. Oh, that right there, that would not have prevented it. That wouldn't have prevented it. That wouldn't have prevented it. As if you can't make it, as Robert said, you make it harder. If you gotta wait to get the gun, guess what? You might have calmed down 2 or 3 days versus you in that particular moment. But they don't want any of that. Their whole deal is they literally just need to go ahead and just come out and say, yo, we don't want no restrictions, so don't even waste our time. I'm telling you, this discussion they're having in the United States Senate, John Cornyn is leading the Republican side, it ain't going nowhere.
No, it's not. And to your point with regard to delays for guns, and in Uvalde and in Tulsa, that was likely to make a difference, because in the case of Uvalde, the shooter bought the weapon on his 18th birthday, and he bought 2 AR-15s. Also, there's an obvious correlation in statistics with the AR-15 and a lot of these mass murders. So the Republican Party, as usual, just wants to change the subject onto something else when it comes to guns. As was already stated, this is about money. This is about gun sales. They don't want to do anything to slow gun sales down. You know, you'll notice that they're laser riveted focused on anything and being against anything that would slow gun sales down. So that's a complete non-starter. So that brings the conversation back to removing people from office who can't figure out that it's a really bad idea to sell AR-15s to 18-year-olds, and a really bad idea to watch mass murder after mass murder happen, whether it's Sandy Hook or Uvalde or wherever it's going to be next. And these people who are serving in Congress that we just heard, that you just played, are completely uninterested in any logic and any reality on this issue. And so the Democratic Party, until the Democrats figure out a way to marry dead children and dead grandmothers getting murdered at a grocery store to this modern Republican Party, this is going to continue. It's as simple as that. I can't imagine why the Democratic Party cannot marry those images to the Republican Party. I mean, I don't understand why that can't happen. I don't understand what the holdup is. Every time we see this issue rolled out, it's sort of the exact same thing with Sandy Hook when President Obama was president. Saw a bunch of children get murdered. We saw the Republican Party go silent, basically take their marching orders and their talking points from the NRA and do absolutely nothing, which is exactly what they're setting up to do again. But heading up into the midterms, it's unclear to me. And I know that none of these parents has pulled a Mamie Till yet, but they've gotten close in the descriptions. I'm really surprised at how much, graphically we have heard about people's children being murdered. And then they're sharing those details. And that's not shaking, and it's not going to shake anybody in the Republican Party. It has to shake the voters. Democrats have to somehow get it into the voters' mind to change the dynamics around how we think about guns. Because right now, how we think about guns is John Wayne and cowboys and masculinity and freedom and patriotism. That's what the Republican Party and the NRA have married guns and firearms to. And until the Democrats figure out how to change that, we're going to still be sitting here talking about this again and again and again.
And this one of the other folks who also testified was one of the doctors who treated these students who were just slaughtered in Uvalde. Here's what he had to say.
I raced to the hospital to find parents outside yelling children's names in desperation and sobbing as they begged for any news related to their child. Those mothers' cries I will never get out of my head. As I entered the chaos of the ER, the first casualty I came across was Mia Cerrillo. She was sitting in the hallway. Her face was still clearly in shock, but her whole body was shaking from the adrenaline coursing through it. The white Lilo and Stitch shirt that she wore was covered in blood, and her shoulder was bleeding from a shrapnel injury. Sweet Mia, I've known her my whole life. As a baby, she survived major liver surgeries against all odds. And once again, she's here as a survivor, inspiring us with her story today and her bravery. When I saw Mia sitting there, I remembered having seen her parents outside. So after quickly examining two other patients of mine in the hallway with minor injuries, I raced outside to let them know that Mia was alive. I wasn't ready for their next urgent and desperate question. Where's Elena? Elena is Mia's 8-year-old sister, who was also at Rob at the time of the shooting. I had heard from some of the nurses that there were 2 dead children who had been moved to the surgical area of the hospital. As I made my way there, I prayed that I wouldn't find her. I didn't find Elena. But what I did find was something no prayer will ever relieve. 2 children whose bodies had been pulverized by bullets fired at them, decapitated, whose flesh had been ripped apart, that the only clue as their identities was a blood-splattered cartoon clothes still clinging to them, clinging for life and finding none. I could only hope these 2 bodies were a tragic exception to the list of survivors. But as I waited there with my fellow Uvalde doctors, nurses, first responders, and hospital staff for other casualties we hope to save, they never arrived. All that remained was the bodies of 17 more children and the 2 teachers who cared for them, who dedicated their careers to nurturing and respecting the awesome potential of every single one, just as we doctors do.
Folks, Jackie Spire, Congresswoman Jackie Spire, also knows about gun violence. She was almost killed during the massacre in Jonestown, led by cult leader Jim Jones. This is what she said today on the House floor.
Madam Speaker, thank you. I believe I'm the only member of this House that is a victim of gun violence. My body is riddled with bullets. I have a divot in my leg that's the size of a football. I have skin grafts on all parts of my body. I live with that every single day. A victim of gun violence is traumatized over and over again. I implore my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, if we had a 737 that crashed every month for 12 months in this country, we would do something about it. And that's what's happening to children in this country. 1,500 kids die of gun violence every single year. We have to do something about it. All we're saying is, don't let them purchase an assault weapon until they're 21. We already say you can't purchase a handgun until you're 21. Dr. Guerrero this morning talked about decapitated heads. Expired. I urge you, I'm leaving this institution. Please do something. I yield back.
Gentleman from Ohio.
That, to me, Robert, I've been saying this, the Democrats every day between now and November, every single day, put pressure. When you talk about these marches, the March for Our Lives, taking these young folks on Saturday, got to have that. You got to have Biden, Harris should be doing them across the country. You make this your narrative every single day. You call on people to call their House members, to call the United States Senate. You have a full court press. You don't let a day go by when nothing is said about gun violence in this country.
I agree completely. I think what's going to be very important is crafting the proper legislation for it. Because as much as we have attention on mass shootings when it's something like Uvalde or Buffalo or Parkland or Newtown, and the list goes on, but we also have to deal with gun violence in our communities that happen on a daily basis. If you're in a major city in the U.S., you basically, when you wake up and turn the news on in the morning, you just expect to hear the body count from the night before first. So we have to make sure we're crafting legislation that will address the totality of gun violence, not just these stories that have a big splash around it. And that's why it's very important the way that we talk about it, the way that we craft the legislation, because if you get too hyperbolic, too outside of the realm where they call it the uncanny valley, where people can't see the realism in it, then it simply becomes more of the political chaff or the political noise. So we need to have a very clear agenda, 3 or 4 points, not one of these Christmas tree omnibus bills that we're trying to get done. And then I actually believe you can get 10 Republicans in the Senate that will be able to cross the line to get those to get something like that done. But it's going to take conversations. It's going to take competence, and as you said, it's going to take an unrelenting push to do something about it.
Well, look, you talk about what it's going to take. Moments ago, Monique, the House actually voted. And they passed a bill that raised the age to 21, as well as prohibits the sale of ammunition magazines with a capacity of more than 15 rounds. It was approved by a vote of 228 to 199. That means that you did have some Republicans who voted for that, but clearly the vast majority voted against it. You see the headline here. That first of all, the tweet that from AP sent out was the U.S. House has voted to set a minimum age of 21 for buying semi-automatic weapons. Then they said the measure is almost certain to fail in the Senate. Well, Robert just talked about some basic things to get done. How basic is it to go from 18 to 21, which is what Congress did when they raised the age when it came to drinking? So, geez, that's hard. That's heavy lifting? Can't hear you, Monique. You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Right, it is a heavy lift, but for the reasons that Robert stated and I stated, and I tweeted about it maybe earlier today. This is a money move. And so 18 to 21 represents years of people not spending money to purchase weapons. And that is the only thing that you can trace that would be a reason why the NRA would oppose it, and therefore the puppets of the NRA that are in the GOP would oppose it. There's no other reason, like in terms of losing their base, losing their following. The vast majority of Americans support it, and you have been able to count on the House getting bills through, not just this, but anything else you could think of, whether it's voting or Roe v. Wade or criminal justice reform, you name it. The bills come, and in the Senate under Mitch McConnell's leadership is where they die. And so I agree with you. The Democratic leadership is going to have to make a real show of it in their support, especially for young people. Like you mentioned, March for Our Lives. I'm Tatiana Washington, who's an organizer for March for Our Lives. I'm talking to her on my show tomorrow at noon. And what I'm looking forward to is the time when they're old enough to make these changes, because we are so our age and above are not trustworthy for securing a future for these young people. And so I anxiously await the time period when young adults who are not much older than my own children can do what is necessary. And I can't wait till more of them are even voting, so that some of these old heads can just go the way of the dinosaur and get gone.
Bottom line is that it is going to be uphill, which is why, again, Democrats should be calling these Republicans out every single day. You cannot let up, Lauren.
Yeah, I mean, the first order of business is you got to stop listening to people who espouse stupid policies that don't work over and over again. Sitting around here listening to Ted Cruz and Louis Gohmert, sitting in a state where they've got, like, I think 3 of the top 20 gun murder homicides in history. I think Sutherland Springs and El Paso and now Uvalde are in the top 20 in the history of the United States. And then we're sitting up here listening to Ted Cruz and Louis Gohmert for what? So the Democrats have to get a lot more aggressive in their messaging, like a lot more aggressive. I mean, I'm really stunned at, I mean, they're aggressive, but they're not as aggressive as what is required given what's going on. I mean, it's literally an issue of life and death. And it's something that everybody understands. There's nothing to explain. It is life and death, and it's common sense. So you're right. I mean, the Democratic Party needs to really strengthen its messaging around this and really hammer them, absolutely hammer them. They have no place to go. That's why they're bringing up